Our very own Rajah Maples is live in Ferguson now. Following that story, Rajah, what's the scene look like currently?
Good evening, Chad. I'm standing in a parking lot that is reserved for media in Ferguson. It's in a Target parking lot. The Missouri State Fraternal Order of Police bought this emergency trailer 2 years ago. Missouri's FOP got the idea from the Oklahoma FOP, which has a lot of experience responding to natural disasters.
Well, this all originated with after the Joplin tornado. Everybody was down there and they saw that the Oklahoma FOP was serving hot meals to the guys in about 24/7. Anytime somebody could come up and get a hot meal. So after we looked at it, we thought, well, this is a great idea. We can load all of our gear right in here.
Marvin Crowe lost his brother and niece in a tragic fire just 3 miles away from his home south of Beardstown.
Well, it's still a big loss. Go by here quite often. Always before when he was here, he'd always be out here in the yard, or kids would be out here. I really miss that.
Bud Crowe's sons Tobias Crowe and Mark Connor issued this statement to KHQA. Quote, Jenny and Bud Crowe cannot rest in peace until this case is solved. We cannot ignore the text messages sent to Jenny the night of the fire with apparent references to a fire. When we learned about the disgusting 911 tapes, we knew then the investigation was compromised. We want justice and closure. Crowe and Connor are referring to this 911 call in which the dispatcher needed convincing that there really was a fire. Beardstown's assistant fire chief told the dispatcher that he wasn't going to respond to the fire unless someone else could confirm it.
You get a county deputy that can run out there. Just send Travis out there and have him call me and tell me what's going on. If they're all standing there and they ain't called it in, that we ain't going.
Tobias Crowe and Mark Connor say they filed complaints with the city of Beardstown against Assistant Fire Chief Keith Reller and Acting Fire Chief Darren Paul. Paul declined to comment for this story. The family also says they filed a complaint in Cass County against dispatcher Damon McComb and filed a lawsuit in Cass County Court last month against Reller and Paul. The city, however, responded to KHQA stating, quote, there are no documents responsive to a complaint at law against the named individuals, nor is the city aware of any complaint at law pending against said individuals, end quote. Frank Williams from Havana, Illinois, made the 911 call that night. As a former police officer, he told KHQA he was very frustrated that night by the prolonged response time by the Beardstown Fire Department. He said the home was burned to the ground by the time he arrived. Williams says no one could have survived the fire by the time he noticed it. However, he said if he would have driven by a half hour earlier, the fire department's response time could have made a difference between life and death. Bud Crowe's autopsy revealed traces of cyanide. Cass County Coroner Wyatt Sager said cyanide is a common side effect of intense smoke inhalation. Sager said a forensic pathologist found no evidence of injuries to Bud and Jenny Crowe's bodies and concluded that they died of smoke inhalation. He thinks a lighted cigarette sparked the fire and that strong wind gusts and 8 to 10 propane tank heaters in the home added to the fire's intensity. This Illinois Fire Marshal's report lists the fire as undetermined and has closed its investigation.
A fire investigation is very complicated and there's a lot involved. And you rely on the scientific method and develop hypothesis. And if you cannot come up with a hypothesis and a 100% cause for that fire, then you have to leave it undetermined.
It's still a puzzle. I would still like to know exactly what happened, and I hope they do get to the bottom of it.
I asked to speak to the man who wrote me the letter. He said that I'd received it because I was outside of the moral guidelines, and in the letter it said 2 specific pages in the student handbook, pages 20 and 27, which deals with sexual misconduct and premarital sex, extramarital sex, homosexual acts.
Martinson said he then asked someone at the university if this letter went out to all students.
He said that it was a letter that was sent to me because it was brought to his attention that I was outside of the moral guidelines of the school. And I asked him how they deal with people who are having premarital sex and those kinds of things. And he says that unless it's brought to the attention of the admissions board, that there's really nothing they can do.
Martinson's letter from HLGU does not mention the words gay or homosexual. It also does not indicate that Martinson cannot come back to HLGU. But Martinson, who was on the school's dean's list, says he cannot think of any other reason why his application would be placed in a state of inactivity.
I was told that I couldn't come back unless I petitioned to the president or I wrote a statement saying that I would adhere to the moral guidelines and basically not be gay anymore.
The university referred all media questions to its legal counsel. A legal representative for the university said he could not comment on the case due to the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, a federal law that protects the privacy of student records. However, the university's online student handbook defines its standard of sexual conduct on page 20 that state, Hannibal LaGrange University upholds the traditional biblical view that it is God's intent that heterosexual union is the only acceptable expression of sexuality. It also states that Hannibal LaGrange University is committed to providing faculty, staff, and students with an environment free from explicit and implicit coercive sexual behaviors. Do you regret coming out?
No, I don't regret coming out at all. I would just like them to know that, it doesn't matter what you do, who you are, if they're really trying to send out a Christian message, they shouldn't be pushing away people that they deem as sinners. They should be accepting of everyone, and they shouldn't be discriminating based on this sin, that sin. Everyone sins.
Concerned residents sent KHQA photos of these malnourished horses outside of Donaldson, Iowa. Jeff Graber owns dozens of them. He keeps them in 2 pastures. This freshly severed horse leg was found on one of those properties this past weekend. Lee County Sheriff Jim Scholl said his department received a complaint about the horses on Christmas Eve.
At that time, I had a deputy respond. He did view the horses. He agreed. Some of them looked thin. Visited with Mr. Graber. There wasn't any visible food where these animals were contained. It was stored in a barn. Since that visit, the hay is now out in the pasture area, highly visible to anyone passing by. The barn is open for the horses for shelter from this cold weather.
Did they have water?
Water hasn't been confirmed yet. I believe they do.
This isn't the first complaint against Graber and his horses. Sheriff Scholl says someone filed a complaint against him in August of 2011.
And it was a founded complaint that there was some animals in dire need to be nursed back to health. The county attorney had us serve notice of rehabilitation to Mr. Graber. Veterinarian was called in so that a certain course of action was planned with Mr. Graber to bring these horses back to health. And he did comply with those stipulations.
Sheriff Scholl says his department is taking the allegations seriously. He says the department has a deputy on staff who is trained to identify horse abuse and neglect. Sheriff Scholl asks outraged residents to have patience.
I understand there's animal groups out there that become emotionally upset over situations like this. We can only ask them to be patient. Let us do our job, because again, the animal's owner still enjoys the same rights as everyone else that may be suspected of a crime. We do take this seriously, but investigations take time.
Rajah Maples, KHQA, Donaldson, Iowa.
A lot of pomp and circumstance going on at Quincy University. I'm Rajah Maples, live from QU. I'll show you what's going on here coming up.
KHQA's Rajah Maples was first on the scene and joins us live from the LaGrange Riverfront.
Ross, I'm standing on the side of the former Pete's Boathouse here at the LaGrange Riverfront, where all is quiet. But 4 hours ago, Missouri Highway Patrol pulled a body out of the Mississippi River right here on this boat ramp. Now, the Adams County coroner, James Keller, has not confirmed that that body belongs to that of the missing tugboat worker who fell off a boat 10 days ago, but he told KHQA he believes that to be the case.
The Quincy Public School Board is looking for a construction manager to lead its $89 million restructuring.
Drivers throughout Illinois are continuing to enjoy the decrease in the cost of gas, including, in southeast Iowa and northeast Missouri. But many residents find themselves frustrated with still having to pay roughly $4 for a gallon of milk. 50 Quincy residents are displaced tonight after a fire broke out at the Hotel Elkton in downtown Quincy.